Hey y'all, welcome back to Sweet and Sour Monologues. This is Alyssa, your host and monologue queen. Still can't believe I call myself that. I feel pretentious, but whatever. Maybe I'll stop eventually. Um, but I just wanted to do my intro without my guest today, just because I have some personal things I wanted to mention as to why I haven't been uh, posting new episodes and etc. So I did have technical difficulties on the last one I was going to do, which was this past Tuesday, and I couldn't get done. And then last Friday, I was going to post one, but on that day, a lot of big, messy things had happened that day. Um, my roommate's dog got sick. She wasn't home at the time, so I was taking care of him all day long, and it was just a snowball effect of really big issues going on. So I couldn't record that day, and the day before I was really busy with schoolwork. So yeah, I just wanted to say that for people who are supporting me and following me and um, giving me words of encouragement, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's difficult to do this, to commit to this, and then, keep up with your life when this is so new to me, and I'm still new to all this in general. I really hope this doesn't screw up this time with me and my guest. Last time, the Zoom video I did with my boyfriend, as we were talking about some DC comic stuff after DC fandom, it just didn't convert. It didn't work. So hopefully this time around it will be okay. Otherwise, I'm going to be completely upset about it. But we'll see. We'll see. I'll try to have a backup and see if that works as well. But you never know. Technology is very out of our hands sometimes, and yeah. But thank you for joining me today, and thank you for tuning in to this wonderful podcast we're going to have with my guest. And now I would love to introduce you to our wonderful guest, Rosa Nussbaum.
1, 2, 3, let's go!
Hey,
Hi.
can you hear me okay and everything, or am I still a bit quiet?
No, I can hear you.
Okay, sweet. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's really nice weather here.
Oh,
It's been
yeah.
like miserable and hot, and then it was like miserable and stormy, and now it's finally like actually nice, like 72 or something, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
gorgeous. How's it with you?
It's so hot. It's so hot here. Yeah. Where are you now?
I'm in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, so I'm in Philly, which is
Okay.
lovely. Yeah, Texas is fucking miserable in the summer.
It's awful. It's terrible. I hate it. And now we have to
Yeah,
wear masks everywhere, and I'm just like, oh, can't.
yeah. No, yeah. How's it been going to school again? That must be weird.
It's so weird. So I went to my first in-person class, and it was sculpture, and we couldn't touch anything that we made, and we just all
What?
felt so weird, and it's just like,
That's bizarre.
yeah, I don't like it.
So wait, you couldn't touch anything that you made? How does that work?
Like, so we all brought in like these mini projects that she asked us to do, and then
Mm.
we all wanted to go around and critique, and as artists, we're so used to
Oh, you're like
touching
very
everything.
tactile for sure.
Yeah, because I mean
Mm.
it's sculpture, and so we want to like,
Yeah.
feel the different textures of it, and we can't touch anything. We can't even get near it, and it's just like, what in the world? So
How far along in your like education are you at this point?
I'm a junior. I had to skip a whole year because of medical issues, so now I'm like behind, but finally, like, yeah, getting done. So I have like about 2 more years.
I'm glad you're feeling better. That's hard.
Thank you. Yeah, it's real tough.
Well, it's good that you came back to it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I don't know. I've been thinking about that a lot recently, actually, because my younger brother's having like a situation where he might have to wait for an extended period of time to get back into education, and I think it's
Oh,
just yeah, I don't know. He'll be fine, but it's just like, it's a lot to, I think, when you're like setting out into the world
Mm-hmm.
as like a young person. And I think a lot of people with this whole COVID situation are having this issue, right? Like, I'm really
Right.
lucky. I've like, I finished my education. I'm like, whatever. I can
Right.
hang around at home for a year.
Yeah. No, it's really difficult. It's just like, I think especially for art students, we're just like we want to
Mm,
be in class, and um like I was talking to my roommate and she's like, ah, people have to go to class. I'm like, I want to be in class. I want to go to class and I miss it. And it's just at the same time I don't want to,
mm.
cause a problem and everybody gets sick.
Are you afraid of it? Like, is it making you nervous?
It makes me nervous because I take immune suppressant medications for my condition, so that's the only reason I'm really nervous. But yeah.
Yeah. So you're basically a vulnerable person in this context. Do you feel like everyone else is being sufficiently responsible?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
in
good.
school, yeah. I think everybody's being school. But I've like, all over the internet, some people are like completely refusing it. And I'm like, it's not about you, it's about
Everybody
everybody.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Right. So you're back in person. Is it 100% in person or?
No, I only usually we would go like 2 days a week and we're only going once a week and then online the rest of the time. So
Right. That makes sense. Do you like, I'm just curious about this because obviously, I had an in-person art education. Do you feel
hmm
like you're missing out?
I feel like I'm missing out, especially because I had to miss a whole year and I was excited to come back to school. And now I'm just like, yeah, I feel, especially like my photography course, my studio photography, which I was real excited to be in class
Right.
for. And I was just like, it's one of my fortes to be in a studio and work in there. And now I can't do it. I have to do it in my home. And it's just like, it doesn't feel the same. And she may like change some, uh, projects around. And I'm just like, I don't know what to do with it. I feel like all my ideas just kind of went out the window because I can't use the same studio and equipment that we had. So,
I think one of the sort of like, I mean, it doesn't feel that way right now, and obviously it's kind of rubbish, but one of the benefits is that once you're out of school, and if you want to continue being an artist and practicing, this is the kind of stuff you're going to have to think about anyway, because
hmm
unless you have like a really great setup in some way, like, I mean, how are you going to have a studio that has all that equipment?
hmm
Are you doing analog photography or is it
um,
digital primarily?
it's it's primarily digital right now for school, but I love film. I love printing, and
Mm-mm.
thankfully, so it's interesting because I thought with studio I would have more range and be able to do like film and scanning and etc. But in my like basic digital photo class that I have to take,
Of
I'm
course not.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah, he's just like, you can do film, and I'm like, great, awesome. Like, like, okay, at least I get to do it because he loves doing that as well. He loves doing film, and he's like, yeah, if you want to, bounce some ideas off of me and see how you can like better print huge. And I go, yeah, I've been wanting to do that because I'm really bad at it. He's like, yeah, go ahead and talk to me about it, and we'll get it done. I'm like, great, because no other professor I've had before has been that flexible with that.
That's
So
really great.
yeah.
I mean, UT has those like photo scanners, and I really learned how to do analog photography at UT. Like, I had sort of basic knowledge before that, but I really got into it because my friends, like some of my friends, were in photo, and I just got really drawn into that practice, and I like long for those scanners.
Yeah.
And like I like look at my negatives, I'm like, please. So that, like, yeah, I definitely covet those, and I'm like, oh, I can look up how much it would be to rent a scanner for an hour, because you can like go places and do that, and I'm like, no.
No. Yeah, I have my own scanner, but I know they have like a different process in the school scanners, and then I was like, oh, it's so much nicer. So
They do such wonderful scans, and they're like little like Easter Island heads, and I'm like,
yeah,
I worship you,
yeah,
scanners.
that's great.
But the other thing about working at home is that, I mean, I don't know, you said you were doing sculpture stuff. I think one of the big things for me has been figuring out how to work safely, honestly, without like toxic stuff. So now I just make like soft sculptures, and I
hmm
use like kids crafts materials. I'm like Googling how to make like puffy paint on like craft videos and things.
Yeah.
because like my studio that I'm in right now is next door to my kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
And like I don't want to die or poison other people in my house.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, you know, like I joke about it, but I really think no one taught me that at school,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is a real shame.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you get taught how to use all these awesome materials and like how to weld and how to do all of that stuff. And then you get like let loose on the world. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, where are you going to get? I mean, I guess I could like get a place with a yard and get a TIG welder or
Yeah.
something. But like, how's that supposed to work?
Right. Right.
Do you know how you're going to figure it? Like, do you have like a plan for that?
So the thing is, like, I'm very new to soft sculpture and like the different materials she's like wants us to kind of get into, and you know,
Who's
she has
teaching you?
like Caprice.
Oh, I don't know.
You know Caprice? Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, she's like the main it used to be fibers course, but now they call it soft sculpture, and yeah, she's
Mm-mm.
like the main professor for that. So but yeah, she just wants to like have us get into different techniques and stuff, and so she even made like her own fake spinning machine, and she's gonna let us use it, and I want to use it because it looks really cool. And but yeah, like I'm like excited to get into it. I'm just like, you know, they want us to work from home, which I understand, and it's like, okay, when it comes to like sewing machines, I have one, so I'll use it at home, but I also want to learn like other techniques from her, from other students, and it's really hard that we can't really interact with each other. And yeah.
It makes a big difference. So are
Mm-hmm.
you guys still paying the same student fees that you would otherwise?
We have like an online fee now, and it's like $150, and I just don't understand why. And a lot of people have been like trying to petition against it. Yeah.
Wait, this is in addition to your student fees that you're already paying for.
I think they got rid of a few fees for some classes, but not all classes. And then for an online fee, I guess because of the Zoom thing, they want us to pay $150.
Right, but the base rate you're paying to go to university is the same.
I believe so, yes.
That's odd.
Yeah.
Having an online fee, I mean, I'm sure it makes sense from their end, but it feels weird.
Yeah.
Also, sorry, I feel like I've been asking you so many questions. I'm like, here,
No,
I'm interviewing you. Come on.
no, it's okay. I love it.
Are you ready for this?
No, I love it. I love it. We just jump in organically. I love it. So
Nice. But yeah, feel free to actually ask me stuff. Sorry, I feel like I've been working on this project, which is actually also a podcast, where I've been interviewing my family members about things.
oh,
And
cool.
so I feel like I'm in the like asking questions mode.
Yeah. See, that's something I'm trying to like get used to, because this is so new to me. I just decided to do it, and I want to see like what I can do with it. And you know, like I messaged you and I'm like, yeah, we can talk about this, but I'm just not very well versed in it. But I think that's the important thing, is just like I don't know the right questions to ask when I talk to artists who work professionally like you. And it's just like, but I think that's what's good, is that you can talk about, you know, your experiences, and then people who are in my same boat, they're just like, you know, okay, now I know where to go from here, and I know what to ask, and I know what to think about if I want to build a career in art.
Right. So that's like an interesting jumping off point, because I think that's a lot of the things that I've been thinking about, and like my friends, my circle, my colleagues have been thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
How do you live sustainably in art? Because the models so far are not very reasonable, right? Tell me what your imagination is of this. Like what happens? You finish school, and then what?
See, that's the thing. A lot of people I know have a completely different path that I want to go. A lot of my friends want to do gallery work. A lot of my friends want to do like build their own business, especially like online, which is a really good, you know, platform to start with, which you know, that's great. But I want to, you know, get my degree and work toward working in photography with like maybe on movie sets, or maybe even magazines like Vogue, Vanity Fair, things like that, because I really like admired photographers like Annie Leibovitz and Mario Testino for a long, long time. So
Right, so you're looking to go more like a regular commercial media path, which I think is, I know very little about, because that's obviously not the path that I've taken. But I think that is probably a better idea.
Well,
if I have to be honest.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, I don't want to seem like, that's a better idea, because at the same time I'm very, I guess, ignorant about what exactly I need to do. For all I know, I need to go get an MFA for that as well. And so I might take a different path, because I don't mind the idea of gallery art. I just don't know where to go from there, because I've tried it. Like okay, so I was part of, in my past school, my community college, we had an art group, and a lot of the people in the group were painters or sculptors, and I was like the only photographer, and I felt very isolated. And it wasn't their fault. Nobody was, really a photographer. I was not trying to blame anybody, but I just felt really overshadowed by everybody. So I didn't have a good experience with gallery work showing or anything like that. And I guess that's like my fear, is going into that and not having a good experience, just like I did then. So, I'm not against doing gallery work. I just think, like, I've always had that idea of wanting to work, even if it's not specifically for a magazine, like I'm working independently as an artist and contributing. How does that happen? How do I sustain myself that way?
I think in the US, photo is, and I don't know that much about this, right? Like my photo friends would know more, but is kind of separate from the rest of the visual arts in some ways. I mean, there's definitely like a big gallery scene, but it's still like very much its own area with its own conventions. I wouldn't say it's harder. I'm not an expert on this particular thing, but like I wouldn't say it's harder to make a career in photo than it is to in a gallery context than it is to make a career in sculpture in a gallery context. It's just that both of those things are really hard.
Yeah.
I think if you want to live the gallery life, like you have to really want it, and even if you really want it, it's kind of miserable. So I think the thing to look at, right, is like quite straightforwardly, what path did people take who are where you want to be? So if you look at like gallery artists who are US artists who have made work and who are showing in galleries, who are photographers, where are they coming from, like in terms of the schools they're going to and where they've shown? And I think if you're looking at successfully, like commercially successful artists, a lot of them have gone to the same schools, and none of those schools are in Texas.
Yeah.
And those are like 3 schools. It's pretty depressing, honestly. And that's kind of where like class stuff comes in. There's a really a lot of those people will be living in New York. It's not impossible to be an artist who doesn't live in New York or LA, right? But it's not easy. Like I was listening to do you listen to the Hyperallergic podcast?
No, I don't.
And do you know Hyperallergic? They're like a art publication.
Yeah, I've heard about them.
Yeah, they have a podcast, and I remember they did an episode on LA, and it was like just like people complaining about how like everyone just thinks about New York, but really there's another city in America, and it's LA.
Yeah.
And it was just like, what is happening? So that's really weird. Like a lot of the people you'll encounter in those spaces are people who are independently kind of wealthy in the first place, right? They're like paying a lot of money to go to school, paying a lot of money to go to grad school, and then living in a city where they're paying a lot of money to live. And so the barrier to entry is super high. Yeah, and if you look at like work that's in collections, that's also by the same people. Like being a female artist in the US, right? Like I think, what is it, like 5% of work in collections is by female artists or something. It's pretty bad. I mean, that also includes historical work, right? And the history is even more misogynist than the present, potentially, depending on which part you're looking at. But yeah, like it's not. I don't know if it's a great proposition, honestly. And so the other way that people who are going that gallery, I mean, not necessarily gallery, but like art world route, right? Are making money is, I mean, I can tell you how I make money, right? I do residencies. I have done teaching in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically it. That's most of where my money comes from. I don't really sell stuff much because I mean, you've seen my work. It's like
It's
weird
not really
performance
something
shit.
to sell. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's fine and fun, and I really enjoy making that, but that doesn't get me very far. I've very recently tried to start submitting some of my video work in more film spaces,
Mm-hmm.
and I've gotten like a little bit of success with that, so that's good. So I don't have to make a new thing every time I'm doing something. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, here, have my film, and then you can pay me to screen it, and that's cool. But I don't make a lot of money. Teaching is less and less of a thing. So I don't know how much you're aware of this, but there's been a big shift in US academia over the last 20, 30 years. Okay. So it'd be really interesting actually for you to look at this at your own college as like, mm-hmm. how many of your teachers are adjuncts? And mm-hmm. So an adjunct is someone who is on a contract that gets renewed semester by semester, mm-hmm. often not employed in a full-time capacity, often doesn't have benefits. Right. You make between $3,500 and $5,000 per class. So that means that it's sort of capping out around $30,000 a year.
Wow.
For the top, like, I mean, yeah. I'm sure you can find people who are getting paid more, but that's like what UT pays mm-hmm. for a full-time adjunct. And while I was there, they oh my God, sorry, it's just so cynical, but like, you know what they did? They, instead of 3 classes was considered full-time at the time, and they wrote us all an email saying, we are going to change the system so that nobody gets 3 classes, so that nobody can get benefits. So wow. They just hired more people and then gave everyone 2 classes.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that like the worst thing you've ever heard?
Terrible. Oh my gosh.
Ugh. Yeah, so that's sort of like, and so the percentage of people who are adjuncts versus people who are tenure track, who are like on track to get long-term sustainable positions mm-hmm. where they get paid to do their research and, you know, get paid to make art basically, mm-hmm. has just like, it used to be like tenure adjunct, and now it's like this. It's like, you can look it up, but it's something insane. Like it used to be 20/80 and it's 80/20 now or something.
Wow.
Fact check that.
Okay, for sure.
But yeah, so it's sort of like a lot of the avenues that people have used to subsidize mm-hmm. their practice and make that viable have been closed down, and mm-hmm. the pandemic has definitely made that worse as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like I'm pretty sure my digital photography professor might be adjunct, because he told like he came here like a year ago, and then he decided to not come this past semester, and now he's back again. And you know, I feel like maybe he's just, you know, that's just not what our professors do. Like we have some specific professors who are there, and then we get some in each semester, and I'm just like, oh, who are you? You know, so I'm just like, yeah,
it's interesting to see. Can I ask who your professor is, just because I might know them?
I had what's his name? Anthony Francis. He's no, okay. Yeah, he's like a regular professor. He's been there for a few years. I had him last year, and he's a great professor. And then the professor I have now is I think his name Daniel Ramos.
Maybe.
I
don't know. Sorry, I feel like I should know people, and then I'm like, oh, actually, I've been away for a few years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, that's yeah. It's just interesting because I think a lot of students assume that their professors do well, you know, mm-hmm. and that their professors are in a sustainable position where they've kind of made it and got shit sorted out, and a lot of them don't.
Right. And that's something that Anthony has told us too, because he does work. You know, he does some gallery work. He's been doing some shows lately, and last semester I was there for a little bit before I had to withdraw, and he was doing a lot of printing, and I go, how's it going? He's like, I haven't slept in 2 hours, but I come here for the printer because I can't afford a printer like this, and I'm taking full advantage of the fact that I'm a professor here. And you know, it's interesting that, you know, he has those advantages in that way, but he's also talked about how, yes, he loves teaching. It gives him a steady income, but he really wishes he could do his art full time and not have to be you know, grading papers and stuff, and we're just like, we're here with you, you know, you're
Mm.
you're a great teacher. We know you don't like all the stuff you have to take care of, like, because, you know, schools have those structural plans, like make sure you give these many assignments to grade and etc., and it's just not
Mm.
something a lot of art teachers like to do. I've heard it from several of my teachers. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of like weird admin stuff where you're like,
hmm,
do I get paid enough to do this?
right.
I do like, I mean, teaching, I've been talking to my friends about this as well. I'm not teaching this semester and I missed it. You know, it's really
Hmm.
great. I mean, how often do you get to really talk to people who are super interested in the same stuff you're interested in,
Hmm.
that you feel like you have a lot to offer to because, you know, you have a certain amount of experience and they're there to learn? That's really, really wonderful. And you feel like you're, I don't know, doing important work in a way that doesn't always feel like you are when you're just making your art.
Right.
Like, I like my work, but it's not always that I feel that. Like, often I'm in my studio alone for, you know, months, and then I'm like, yeah, I made a thing.
Yeah.
And then like an art institution's like, good job, look at you. Wasn't that clever?
So I do want to ask, just because you mentioned you do residencies, I don't really know how they work. So how,
Mm.
yeah, how do they work?
Okay, so it's a big and wild world of residencies out there.
Okay.
They work very differently, but basically the principle in general for most of them is you go a place, you live there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Usually there's a studio or place you can work there, and you get paid to be in that place
Okay.
and do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, I don't know, a few weeks to a few months to, you know, at the outer end, like a couple of years. There are residencies that like you would pay to go to. Do not do that.
Wow.
That is like,
Oh.
that's, I don't know, for bougie people or something who are like, I want like an art vacay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but they're like, look, we're so prestigious. Here, have a prestige. But then there's also the weird thing, and this is like a very American thing, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, like American schools do this, right? Where you have like a high price tag, but then there's secretly like a scholarship.
Hmm.
So just sort of be on the lookout for those. So like I was
Okay.
just doing this residency called Residency Unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
They had a food futures themed residency. They're based in New York, but we obviously went digital because it started in April.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was just like cancelled. But it was nice that they didn't really cancel it. They were just like, we're still going to pay you. And I was like, yes, good
Okay.
residency. Oh, and I'm also technically in residency in Germany right now. I
Oh,
don't know if you can tell. Yeah, but residency unlimited, I think usually you have to fund yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But this particular open call, they were like, we're getting money from, I think it's like the National Endowment of the Arts or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, funding things. And I was like, okay, I can do
Okay.
this. I can dedicate this many hours for this much money.
Mm-hmm.
And the other weird thing is as well, in the arts, like I'm used to working jobs that pay by the hour, right? That's been most of my life work experience outside of the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And in the art, your labor is never tied to the money you get. Everything is like an honorarium.
Okay.
So it's like, here's $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
This has no relationship to the amount of work we're expecting from you. It might be way too much. It might be way too little.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like it's completely decoupled. It's really, really odd.
Okay.
No one's ever going to tell you we expect 40 hours of work a week, and then you can like do the math and be like, okay, so you're paying me $2 an hour, so that's not okay.
Okay. Okay. I was wondering because I did keep up with an artist that came from women in their work as well. Shayna Owen. Yeah. Okay. So she came, and then she, I think right after her, I can't think today. The opening, she went
Yeah.
straight to residency in the Netherlands, and then I saw on her.
Ooh, where'd she go?
She went to, oh, I forgot what it's called. Yeah, it's like this.
But they have a few good ones, like Van Eyck
Yeah.
Academy and stuff.
Yeah. I think it was that one. Yeah, and so
like a long-term one.
I think so. And
sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're okay. But yeah, she ended up posting on her Instagram, like, does anybody know any jobs that are going around? And like, don't you make money, so I guess I don't know what residency is. And I never got to ask her. I was just like, I don't really understand how residencies work, and if that's an option later on for like me or some friends of mine and stuff like that. So
I think the problem with residencies and residency hopping is one of the things that they consider a perk is that they're giving you somewhere to live, right?
mm-hmm.
But they're giving you somewhere to live for like a month, for 2 months. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, my apartment is still here. My landlord still wants rent.
Yeah.
I live with my partner, so I can't like Airbnb it. I'm like,
Yeah.
you go live somewhere for a month or something. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like it's not really like, making me come to Maine for a month isn't like you're doing me a favor.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just means that like, I don't know, I don't have my like kitchen stuff.
Yeah.
And home things. I mean, it's not the worst, it's a beautiful place. Actually, I haven't been to Maine, I've been to Vermont, but like, I'm sure it's beautiful. I'm sure you can go for lovely walks and stuff, but that's not, it's really weird and difficult to really make sustainable money. Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. You're constantly reapplying for your own job.
Oh, okay.
That is my life. Like I am constantly applying for new opportunities. Like every month I'm applying for new stuff and trying to get things lined up for the future because, once the residency is over, it's over. And then that's sort of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I am curious too, like, okay, so when it comes to, I guess, getting your work into shows and stuff, and typically there's investors, donors, things like that, or I guess people who can donate. I've seen them donate materials and stuff like that. I believe they donated for like your little stage when you did your performance at Women in Their Work and stuff like that. How does that work? Do you feel awkward, like, I guess, asking for that, or do people just come to you in a sense? Like, how does that work?
Women in Their Work specifically, they had, what was it? Like Fine Lumber or something is what that place is called.
Something like that.
And they had that relationship as a pre-existing thing with Women in Their Work. So Women in Their Work were like, do you want wood from this place? I'll give you wood for free. And I was like, yes, please. So I didn't feel awkward because they'd figured that out. They were asking for me, I just had to show up and say what I wanted. Sorry, thirsty.
No, you're good.
In general, I think that from my friends, like the most success they've had has been for like sponsorship stuff with like alcohol companies like Tito's and stuff. So, or even like Friends and Allies Brewery. Like a lot of those places want to seem cultural and like they're invested in the arts, and so they'll, I don't know, give you booze for your opening or something, or in some cases pay you.
Oh, okay.
Some places do have sort of, I mean, I've gotten materials from places before, like a foam factory. It's like, can I have some of your foam? And they were like, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Right.
Especially because a lot of places will have scrap materials that will be like gold to you. Yeah, sorry, I know I'm not like super helpful with this.
No, it's okay. I'm just curious, like, because I know, like, I've seen, like, I was working during installation with Jennifer Ling Dutchick as well, and she went and had like lunch with some of the board members, and I'm like, I'm just like, I guess I just have that fear personally of like, do I have to schmooze people? Do I have to like talk myself up? And I'm just not that kind of person, I guess. And like,
oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like how often do you have to do that as an artist, and how weird is it, I guess?
Very weird. And it depends what you want, like I think you have to decide what you want from your art career. Do you want to make oodles of money in a traditional gallery context that involves talking to lots of rich people and making them like you? You're gonna have to schmooze them.
Yeah.
Do you not want to do that and do it differently? Then you make your own rules.
Yeah.
But no, I completely relate. I'm like, ew. Also, the weirdest thing was I ran a small gallery space in London when I was just out of undergrad, and someone tried to schmooze me. And that was like the weirdest fucking experience. I was like, ew, get off. It was also so funny. I was like, oh my god, it's so depressing that like everyone's thirsty enough that like my tiny little thing that I'm running that's barely a thing is something that I would say, like, you know, keep a really good network of friends who you like and who will stand up for you and who will mention you and who you can collaborate with. That's really, you know, that's not schmoozing. That's like having real relationships with people. And that's really good. But, you know, like, I mean, everyone does what they have to do to like make money. I'm not going to judge anyone for being better at schmoozing than I am.
Right. And I think earlier you mentioned, like, you know, some people, or I guess like the people who make it out in New York, they already have money, they already have, you know, I guess that social status, those contacts. And I guess I'm wondering, like, how big is that, I don't know if you call it cliche, but just that general phrase, like, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Like, how much does that matter with, like,
a lot?
Like,
I would say that matters a lot, but then you know, I mean, other people make it work without knowing that many people. You just get to know them. I think there's a big barrier. I think that there is have you ever been around people who are like way wealthier than you and have very different reference points?
Yes.
It's really, really weird. And you know, like, I'm not even from like a super poor background or anything. Like my family have, like, we've never like struggled for food or anything, right? Also, I grew up in Europe, so everything is different. It's more egalitarian, and you don't have to pay for a lot of stuff, so you don't really feel it if you don't have that much money necessarily. Depending, like, you know, I got to go to a good school, and the government just sort of paid for it, and it was like, cool.
Okay.
Thank you, government daddy, for my education. Yeah, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. So being around like super posh people, like, I've been around, like, occasionally around like really, really fancy people who in like an art context, and they've been like, oh, you know, my holiday on my yacht in, you know, Bermuda or something. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. I'm having extreme class anxiety. And even in this residency that I was in, I feel like a lot of people had all these same reference points for like bougie New York stuff that I like, it's like, I don't know what that is. I mean, I'm not from America anyway, so like often I'm like sort of on manual for references, you know. I'm like, I will Google this pop culture. You can't see. But, yeah. So that's happening anyway. But yeah, I think a lot of people know how to behave in certain spaces in a way that I definitely don't know how to behave.
Yeah.
And I either like get really awkward or just sort of like say the bit out loud that you're not meant to say.
Yeah.
Get really resentful and passive aggressive. So I don't think I'm a model. Just, you know, look to other people for guidance.
It's so odd though. It's just like even when I had that terrible gallery experience, you know, it's complete opposite. Like, it wasn't like the bougie rich people, and, you know, we were all like going in this, no offense to this guy, pretty ghetto gallery, and it's just kind of like, you know, it was just so weird though, personally, just to, like, all my friends had like this real flow to talking to people and getting to, you know, talk about their art. And again, like I said, I felt like a little overshadowed in general, but I just felt so awkward. I didn't really talk to anybody. I didn't, you know, and I'm just wondering, like, did you start out that way? Were you pretty organically doing it fine? Like, and also, did you start with group shows? Because mine were only group shows. So.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely started with group shows. It's also like a nice way to do things with friends, to get to know people, to like expand who you know, because obviously you meet all their friends then, which is really nice. I think what I just did was I went to a lot of shows in London, and we would just go every week to openings, and then you get into the flow of stuff just by doing it a lot. You know, and then sometimes you're awkward and sometimes you're not, and sometimes you're having a good evening and sometimes you're not, and then you just get better at it, I think. But I still get awkward when people ask me what I make. I'm still weirdly inarticulate about it, which is so odd, because like I totally know what I make and I'm really interested in it, and I think I can talk about it, but if someone meets me for the first time, they're like, what do you do? What are you working on? And I'm like, oh, elevator pitch time. I think it's also, it's like talking yourself up is just a weird thing to do. I don't know what the balance there is. I mean, as part of that, like, isn't the saying you should walk into the room, you know, with the confidence of like a cishet white man?
Yeah.
Be like, everyone wants to know what I've got to say. What do you struggle with? Like, if someone was asking you what you did.
So on a typical basis, not even in like any art setting, any gallery setting, whatever, a random typical person I just happen to meet and I say I'm a photographer or an artist, they go, oh, what do you do? Or my main question I always get is, oh, you're a photographer, do you do like wedding photos, baby photos, you know? And I'm like, no, not at all. And when I explain it, their face just goes from oh to oh. You know, it's just like, I don't know what else to tell you. I don't do the typical thing. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's just not me. And I'd never gone to that point of I want to do it to even make some money, because it's just not my thing. I did it once for my cousin who got engaged, and I was like, God, I hate this, but you know, happy wedding, you know, and it's just kind of like, yeah, that's just my main struggle when it comes to saying I'm a photographer.
Right. Yeah. No, I remember my grand's friends being like, oh, you're an artist, so you do watercolor? And I was like,
no.
But on the other hand, I think you have to have faith in people's ability to like actually understand art, because I think people do, even people who aren't super like into art world stuff or whatever, I think they actually really like art.
Yeah.
Just has to be presented to them in a way that's accessible. So maybe a way to talk about that is to talk about what you're interested in. So when I'm talking about my work, I am interested in issues of gender and immigration. But I also do, like, my work's quite humorous. And sort of like silly. So I try and tell anecdotes around that. Or I go and literally say what I made. I'll be like, I made a boat that's also an instrument. And people are like, oh, fun, you know? Like maybe you have a piece or a series that you can talk about in a way that's really accessible, that you can then give as an example. Like, what do you make work about? What are you interested in?
I'm mostly interested in like mental health, and sometimes I've done a few things on feminism and trying to, you know, raise awareness for equality and stuff like that. It's just a little bit hard for me personally, because some of the ideas I want to do, I don't have as many. I like to photograph people more than you know, things or going out and photographing. I like doing studio kind of work, and so when I don't have enough people to participate, as opposed to like I can't afford an actual model, you know, it's really difficult for me to find people to do that. And sometimes I end up just being like, I'll do it myself. I will do a self-portrait depending on the context. So like I've done even body image as well. And, you know, since I'm plus size, I've done like some images of, I had like my boyfriend and my friend pull on a corset of me, and I just let that natural reaction happen as we were photographing. And then I completely photoshopped it to where my body was just morphed real skinny. And, you know, I felt uncomfortable doing that to anybody but me. And also because it was about my own insecurities. So I also talk about that, and just depends on the context and like what I want to talk about, and whether I should do it myself or I can bring somebody else in. So
there is a really good essay. I'm trying to remember what it's called. I think it's about Tracy Emin. I found it helpful in thinking about how work about the female body is often like, I'm in my work a lot, so I was like, oh, all my work is my face. So when I put presentations together, it gets really awkward. I'm like, look at me. It's about why the artists who are dealing with a female body and embodied sort of realities, often working with their own body, and how that complicates the sort of author subject relationship. They say it better than I do.
Yeah.
In the essay. I think if you do want people to work with you as models, you definitely need to be able to show them what it is that is exciting to you about the work, because obviously you want to sort of collaborate with them. So what do you want in the context when you're working with other people and their bodies and stuff?
I think it's, I can only really say that if I have an idea in mind. Yeah, it's just really difficult, like if I don't have a specific thing going on. And I think what's interesting is I did sort of come up with a small concept so far. I haven't really gone into it fully yet, but just thinking about like my roommate, she has a lot of body issues, and it's completely opposite from what I've dealt with. And she used to be like my size, and she got a surgery and she's real small now, and it's like she still has those feelings of she doesn't love herself. And I am just like, I've done a lot to love myself no matter what size I am, no matter what I look like. And there's part of me that wants to ask her to be a part of that project, but the other part of me doesn't want to feel like I'm judging her and that I'm using her in a way to, say these things that
make a point or something.
Right. And it's difficult because she's so, like, I'm not trying to be rude, I'm really not, but she said it too. She's like, I don't love myself. I'm very insecure about my body. And it's just something that I love talking about all the time, but I also don't want to make a victim out of her, so to speak, or make her just the subject that people stare at and make fun of, I guess you could say.
It's so hard. I mean, that's just like a really, really difficult problem. I've been thinking about that so much because I mentioned the podcast earlier. So I have my granddad's deathbed confession. He died like a year ago, and he'd had a secret or a lie or something he'd kept from his family all of his life. And then he tried to tell us about it right at the end, and my aunt recorded it.
Wow.
But he's like kind of like he's struggling to remember things and having like issues of dementia and stuff right at the end, right? So he's sort of constantly slipping back into the lie and then trying to tell the truth, and then it's sort of like this sort of looping back on itself where you can't actually quite get to it. Yeah, it's pretty intense. And so I've been interviewing my family about this, and it's sort of like, I mean, he was like a Holocaust survivor, and so there's all this stuff in it, and they all had quite a difficult childhood with him. And on the one hand, I'm like, they're interested to be talking about it, but on the other hand, it's like, there's a lot of grief there, and they're like, I don't know, I'm being very much held accountable for bringing up painful subjects, and they're like, why does the world have to know about this? Why are you making this public piece of work with these recordings that are really personal to us? What does that do? So if you find out how to make ethical work with other people's narratives, let me know, and then I'll I think the way to do it is maybe to bring that into the story in some way. Maybe you have to bring your own perspective into it, or give her a lot of agency.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. It is difficult with her just because when I do try to talk to her in general, it's like, a pushback every time. So it's just kind of like, it depends on who you're talking to and how they react to what you're talking to. And as opposed to listening and responding, it's more just a pushback to, yeah, but I feel like this and I don't care what you say kind of thing. So I think, it hasn't. Sorry.
Like a pushback on you saying, I wish you felt better about yourself, or?
Well, just like, I told her, I think one big thing is she wants to be able to go through issues with a boyfriend that she has been trying to be with. And it's just kind of like, you don't need another person to think about yourself and worry about yourself and work on yourself. I started doing that myself for a few years, and then my boyfriend came in the picture, and he was a good support system, but there are even times where I was like, you don't have to be in this with me. This is a lot of bullshit that you don't need to deal with. And he was like, I'm not going anywhere. So he was a great support system, but it wasn't like what I went to feel better either. I work on that myself constantly, and he just supports me in the end. And I just try to tell her that my boyfriend came over and we were talking about it with her, and talking about relationships and saying a relationship is about communication and supporting each other, but none of that was taken in. And she's just kind of like, she doesn't want to go worry about things without somebody next to her to worry about it with her. And it's like, it's just that kind of thing. Like, I always try to emphasize with mental health and body image, like, it's something you have to do yourself. You're the one who has control of it. And she didn't make me feel bad about myself, and I'm glad I've gotten to that point where I don't feel bad when someone else is talking body image. But at the same time, it made me think, like, I kind of want to do another thing where it's like, you have the power and you're the only person who has that power, but how do I convey that? So that's when I've been writing down and trying to figure out too. But I don't know if I necessarily want to ask her to be a part of it, because I don't want her to feel like she's being looked at as an object or something that's to be made fun of, or something that's to be scrutinized in a way. So
that makes sense. Yeah, no, I very much also relate to that feeling of having friends who are definitely think that a relationship will fix a thing, where you're like,
it's like, no. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on doing the hard work. It's really, it is hard. No, I don't know. Do you guys have access to like therapy and things through school?
We do. I've never used it personally. I do have a therapist myself, but
okay, it's good that it's there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's miserable to have to, I don't know, choose between money and health.
Right.
Oh, it sucks. Yeah, those are, I mean, I was thinking about while you were talking about this, teaching at UT and being actually a TA, because I was TAing during my grad degree, and having a professor who was, because I teach like performance based classes, and I was TAing for a performance class, and often like things like this will come up, right? Because like the majority of undergrad students who are doing art are female, and are going to have, are at these campuses that have like really intense pressures on them. You're moving away from home for the first time. There's also some pretty bad like rape and sexual assault culture going around, like really, really bad. I was pretty horrified when I like heard the statistics and like also heard the like student experiences, and I was like, how is this place still running, and how has no one shut it down? And I remember like the instructor was saying like to me sort of after class, like, oh, we always get all this work by female students, these young women who are doing this type of work about body image, and it's kind of boring. Like that was the implication, like, oh, not again, someone doing it, and I was like, okay, but like the reason that this is common is because this is a massive issue, and that all these young people are trying to make their way in the world, and they have this massive sort of block in front of them where they're having to figure something out about themselves, and it's being put, and they're not really getting much support. I don't know, I thought it was so shitty to dismiss that as like, this is the patriarchy, go away.
Yeah,
it's not what I said, because I was like new, and I was like, I don't know what anything is.
Yeah.
But I feel bad for not having spoken up at the time. I was just like, it's like one of those conversations you have where you're like, I'm going home now. And then later on, you're like, should have said a thing.
Right.
It's okay. I'm going to time travel into the past and tell myself. But have you had any experiences where you've been like certain types of content that you've made have had more like people have related to in particular ways, and how have your professors related to your work versus the other students relating to your work?
I wouldn't say personally relating. I think they would mostly relate it to, like, they can see influence from other artists. Like I did some influence from Cindy Sherman, but of course he gave some critique, like just like think about her time was a different time of feminism. There's a different wave of feminism, and then look at our time, and does it seem kind of victimized a little bit compared to now? And I go, yeah, I would say that. And so I changed up my idea a little bit. But I I would say in general, I've had some conversations with colleagues and peers, and that I would talk to them about what I'm working on, and then they would share some pretty tough stories with me. And they're like, I hope I'm not like weirding you out talking about this. I'm like, no, I'm always here to listen and get experience. And sometimes I do take those experiences and I do ask them, like, do you mind if I kind of share this in another work or something like that? And they go, yeah. And so I don't mind. And then
That's
sometimes
nice.
they're like, no, I don't want it. And it's like, okay, cool, that's fine. So yeah.
It's good that if people are like bringing this stuff to you and your work is a catalyst, and it also feels like you're doing important work and like it's moving and generating a conversation.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Do you generally feel like your work is doing something in the world?
Yes and no, because yes, I feel like I'm getting a good message out there, but then it's like, and I think that's a big issue. I've talked about social media. I've seen a lot of great artists on social media, they don't have a lot of followers, but then like people who do kind of art that has no substance and no meaning, they get tons of views, tons of likes, etc., and followers. And then people who do meaningful work don't. And I feel like, I'm not like vying for followers or anything like that, but I do feel like if it's an important thing, I wish it got a few more views and a few more people sharing and trying to help get words out there, because I do try to spread word and awareness about certain subjects. And yeah.
I guess having a platform like magazine photography would be really appealing based on that, because you'd have such like a sort of an inbuilt audience.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I think doing visual art in a gallery sort of context, I think most art stays relatively obscure. Even if you're doing relatively well, I don't think you're. The weird thing is, if you're doing art world art, you're often doing it for other artists and other like influential people in the art world and collectors. I mean, not from your emotional motivation necessarily, but that's the channels that it's going to go into. So I think it's really great that you're thinking about making work that can be seen in other contexts by humans.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
I do want to know, like, just going back to school, like, what have you gotten out of it, and like, what are some things that you kind of could have gone without when you were in school?
Yeah. Okay. So I went to school 3 times. I went to it's just because the UK has a system called a foundations year. So you do 1 year where you're like, it's sort of self-contained, and you do art, design, you do it's like a little sort of flavor tasting board thing.
Okay.
You snack on all these different disciplines. It's like a creative undergrad 1 year thing. Wow. And then you do 3 years at a separate institution. So you do your 4 years all at once. Okay. But it's a separate thing in the UK. And so for the sort of second part, my actual bachelor's, I went to Wimbledon College of Art, which was really, really nice. It's the program I did was print and time-based media, which is actually being discontinued now, which is really sad. But it was really fun and experimental. And in the UK, it's really different than in the US, right? Like, you guys show up and you get like assignments and classes and stuff. Yeah. And we sort of show up and get given a studio, and people are like, we'll come back in 3 years and see what you made. Okay. Which is, it sounds kind of bad and harsh, right? But like, I also basically didn't pay. I paid like £2,000 for college for my undergrad, which is pretty good. Like, I didn't really have much debt when I came out of it.
Wow.
And fees went up after I started, and I also got like money from the German government because that's where I grew up, and they've funded part of my international degree, which is really nice. So that, I mean, this just took the strain off so much. No, but I really appreciated just sort of being thrown in the deep end and being like, here's a bunch of people who are super interested in what they do. And they're your resource. And then you have like wood workshops and stuff, and you can go there to learn things, but really mostly you're just hanging out with your peers and making work with them and figuring your own stuff out. And I think to me, coming from that system, I feel like the US is a bit overtaught. Like the fact that you're constantly having to deliver assignments and you don't get to work on long-term projects. I think there's a certain maturity you get from being able to just work on your own stuff.
Yeah.
And have to sort of figure that out.
I do have to agree with that. I think there's one thing I don't like about college is, you know, I think we have about 3 to 4 assignments per semester, and sometimes I just feel so rushed because I just want to take my time. And sometimes I do end up, you know, starting out like, okay, what can I start with? But at the same time, I don't know their typical assignments. And then there's some professors who are like, it's pretty open. Let's just say it has a subject, but it really doesn't. Just go for it, which is what I had like with Anthony. He was just like, I want you guys to kind of work on this, but at the same time, I don't care. You know, I don't care what you need to do. Just go for it. And if it also depended, like, I was a bit more advanced in that class because it was the foundations class that I had to take. And there were people who had never done film ever, and I'd been doing film for many years. And same with my friend who came with me from our previous school. And we talked to him immediately, and we are just like, can we kind of just, you know, float in our own boat? And he goes, yeah, for sure. And then there's some professors who are like, no, you need to follow my structured plan. And it sucks that I just feel like I have to meet a timeline that isn't the most practical in terms of, I guess, what you would do in the real world, so to speak. Because it's not a few months, it's a few weeks. And then, you know.
And I understand the desire to like just get people to do some stuff, because I think, you know, there is a barrier to making a thing and finishing a thing. And so I think there's like a balance to be had in that. But I think overall, I also think it makes students less independent. Like I was shocked at how much like my students would like ask me in the US when I was teaching here. They'd be like, oh, just asking me questions about like how to do a thing. I'm like, have you Googled it? And they'd be like, no. I'm like, why are you asking me? Like, have you ever seen that XKCD flowchart about how to solve problems? I can send it to you later. It's just like, step 1, look for a menu option that has the name of the thing that you want to do. You know, have you solved your problem? Yes, no. And then like step 2 is like Googling it. And like there's all these steps before you actually ask somebody who's an expert in the thing. And I think it's really useful. I learned how to Google. I learned how to Google in undergrad. That's basically what I learned. And how to ask my friends about things and ask them for help and to make a network. And I think it also made us show much more in like spaces, like, you know, because, you know, what were we going to do? Just have stuff in our studios? No, like we were going to show in like weird sex club basements and whatever. And it was great. It was really easy to clean because you could hose the whole place down. But one thing I didn't learn is how to make things. Like I sort of learned how to make things, but like kind of I was never able to complete a project that involved craft to the degree that I wanted to. And you see my practice is really material focused, especially now. And so coming to the US and doing my grad degree here was awesome because I learned how to make stuff.
Right.
I was at school with all these people who'd gone for the American undergrad system who had like really, really amazing skills because they'd actually been taught. And so I really, really benefited from that. So I, you know, on the other hand, it's a bit of a trade-off, right? You have less freedom, but you come out with really, really rigorous craft skills.
Yeah.
So
and
go ahead.
No, I think that, you know, like I'm starting my soft sculpture class this semester, and I'm like, you know, there's a lot of techniques and a lot of materials I've never used, and I'm really excited to try. At the same time, you know, I only have a few months to do it, and it's like, oh, I can do it after. But then, you know, I think one thing I kind of take advantage of, and I feel like I wouldn't take that much advantage of it, you know, being in school if I didn't have financial aid, paying for it fully like we used to, is just, you know, we have the equipment there and I don't. And it's just like, you know, there's different methods to get it done, but it, like when it comes to analog and film that I love to do, if I'm not in school, I have to take it to a place to get done, and it takes like 2 weeks or a few days. And it's a huge thing about me. I'm just like, I want to get it done now. And it's just, or I want to do like a print from the darkroom, and I can't because I don't have a darkroom. And, you know, me and my friend were thinking about at one point a few years ago. We were like, let's pitch in for a dark room that we can make. I can put in my backyard. We have a system to get water and stuff. And that never happened because we realized how much it would really cost to do all that. And we're like, we still need more money. You know, it's just like, and then we looked for places that rent out dark rooms, and the closest we could find didn't cost us like an arm and a leg was in New York, you know, and we're like nowhere near New York. So it's just kind of like,
well,
it's
it's
like,
only a 20-hour drive or whatever.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, we can take full advantage of the equipment there, but once we're gone, it's like, what do we do? And I'm, you know, that's the one thing I'm scared of, because I do love working with film more than digital a lot of the time. So
yeah, I think either having a job in the industry or going on residencies that have that type of equipment are both paths, or teach, or MFA. Just stay in academia forever and have the resources. I get really annoyed not having access to like the library stuff. Like even like JSTOR or something. I'm like, give me my papers. I need them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I have friends who still teach as well. So I'm like, so.
Can I use it? Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah. The thing I could have done without at my US like MFA university experience was I could have done without the competition. UK people aren't as competitive. And I think the system here was like super rigged for competition. Like we had like scholarships and stuff, and they would go to like 2 people in the year or something. And like, it was just, it got constantly, we were like being pit against each other by the system, which I think didn't foster solidarity. I could have done without, I mean, and this is a problem I think I had in myself, you know, and that's something I figured out afterwards, but like, I started making work for my committee, my like thesis committee. And I was like, what's wrong with you? You know, no wonder you feel like really alienated and shit. You're making your work for like 5 people so they can give you, you know, they approve of you or something. You know, and it's also because I just moved from another country, and I just, you know, I mean, I didn't really have a big world. Like my world was just this tiny little nib. Those things, I think. And then departmental politics, where like, I think in retrospect I look back and I think the system was also kind of rigged against like the women of color who were in the program in a way that I wasn't really conscious of when I was there. Where I think they faced just like a really like, I don't know, like a hostile environment, but like not overtly. And I wish I'd been more aware of that at the time. And I wish that, yeah, there was just kind of more conversation around that, and the sort of like more conversation around how to restructure the program into being more equitable.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did learn over the years, and it's not like I've shown work in Austin. I've just been, you know, working at women in their work, and just seeing like you come in and seeing like there's a real, at least from what I see, there's a real good community within Austin when it comes to art world, and at least, you know, support in a way, like throughout the community. I don't know about, you know, anything monetary wise or anything. I guess you could talk about it in a minute. But I did notice that from where I'm from San Antonio, and just seeing, I think that's one big reason I didn't do well in our art group was a lot of people here, they either love Chicano art or like Mexican based art, or they really love paintings and sculptures that they can put in their home. And if you otherwise photography, they really want just a business that they can go to for, like I said, their weddings or engagements or babies, etc. And there's a huge competition in terms of that I felt I couldn't compete in, where maybe one day if I go to Austin or wherever, it would have a better chance of being showing my work and stuff like that.
So you feel like there's like different contexts in which there's more demand for the type of work that you're making?
For sure.
I'm sure that's true. I'm sure that's completely true. And it'll hopefully feel really rewarding when you find that. I mean, another interesting way that I've seen photographers specifically work with their stuff is working with books, like photo books. because
Yeah.
that seems like a really sweet in between
Mm-hmm.
medium where like you can distribute it. It's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like a little gallery that you can give to somebody.
Yeah.
But it's also not as exclusive and stressful. And there are some like, I think, cool photo publishers who do like art photo books.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like it's not my zone.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you found that difference coming to Austin. Where have you been? Have you been to other places and like sort of observed art worlds in different places?
I'd say the only other place would be Dallas, and that was a
Mm.
long time ago. I don't know how different it is now, but I just remember it being a lot of rich people, a lot of
I hate
huge
Dallas.
galleries. Oh gosh, I've heard so much. Like, yeah, it's just oh.
I feel so bad because once in a while I meet somebody who's from Dallas and I'm like, I
It's like,
can't.
oh no.
It's like the worst place. I don't
Yeah,
understand why it exists.
yeah. No, I've seen just such a complete shift, and I'm not saying that San Antonio doesn't have like a community, so to speak, in the art world. I think they do, but I think it also
Mm.
depends what kind of art you do that fits with that community, and it kind of sucks that it feels a little exclusive, at least from my end, and my experience. And I still support my friends who show and do work and try to sell, but at the same time, I think some artists kind of, I sound so mean, but they kind of sell out in a way, and they do like the very kitschy pop art stuff just to sell. And it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can do that to start making money, but what's your work? What's your vision of art, and what do you want to do? And sometimes I feel like some people don't want to do it because they're scared to try and sell their work, and it's like you never know until you try. I want to see what you have to say. So
Mm. I'm thinking about like the art spaces in San Antonio. I think the only time I showed anything in San Antonio was at Luminaria.
oh, okay.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
they gave me and a few friends of mine a commission.
Mm-hmm.
Um, have you tried like they seem quite nice. I don't know
Yeah.
like have you tried applying for their grants? I think they have specific ones for like local area artists as well.
Oh, no. I didn't know they had grants.
Yeah, no, they pay really well. They seem really quite ethical in the way they're doing
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
I don't exactly know how everything's going because of COVID, but like
Mhm.
I'd check it out.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think they also had when we were there in one of the like weird little house things on that like
Mm-hmm.
Hemisphere Park.
Mm-hmm.
I think they had a photo show in there.
Oh,
Might
okay.
be a way of
Yeah.
because it's not just outside light stuff.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I know most about them is, all the lights, which is great. I love all the installation work that's out there. It's fantastic. But
Have you also considered like with your photo work trying to push the format a little bit further so that the photos are still at the center, but seeing if there's other ways of presenting it that would maybe allow people to engage with it in a way where they're not like, I think if you go into a white gallery space and you see a photo framed on the wall, there's already like a barrier, right? And
for
like
sure.
maybe there's a way of like tricking people a little bit into thinking that it's like a more familiar format.
No. What's an example, I guess, that you would say? Like I don't know any other way than just printing and putting on a wall at this point, unless I were to like partner it with like another medium like sculpture or something, which is what I do love doing that as well.
That is also really nice. I was thinking I did a series of works where I used overhead projectors and storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And I've obviously used the like, slide projectors as well, which is all photo work. But
Right.
I mean, I just I do narrative work, so that's I'm not saying that this is something that you should do or anything, but like
Yeah.
I found it was people love stories. People are like always down to sit down and you like tell them a story, and then you're like,
Mm-hmm.
here's a picture, here's a word,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, yes, this is the stuff. because like everyone's familiar with that from like carpet time at school. Like you have like
Mm-hmm.
maybe your parents have told you stories or your teachers when you were a kid or something.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can tap into like a familiar format, then people are sort of more open. Or like if you make like I do with the like funny stuff, people
Okay.
are like, oh, it's a funny. and then you already like let your guard down.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I definitely, when I go into a gallery space, I definitely feel like I have something to prove. I'm like, I gotta understand this art. I'm gonna interpret it.
Yeah.
And then I'll feel satisfied when I feel like I know what it's about. And then I'm like, and then I can be like, I like this, or I don't like this, and I'm really smart. But I understand that there's maybe a defensiveness around artwork. Whereas if something is more kitsch or pop, then you're like, oh, that's my language. I can have that as like a regular human.
Yeah. I guess one of my biggest questions, especially because, like I said, coming out of college, I'm like, I don't exactly know where to go. Like, if I were to go more the route kind of like you did, as opposed to, or maybe starting there and then going somewhere else, maybe I'll go toward magazine work. I don't know. Or just, I guess this is more of a question for like my friends who want to do kind of the route you do. Where do you start? Like, what do you do? Like, where do you go from there?
I'm not saying that I would advise anyone to go the route that I've gone. But, if you do find yourself on this particular path, I would say have shows with your friends. Like, hang out with your friends and do stuff with them. Find alternative formats that aren't just about the galleries. Find people whose work you like and who are doing well, and then just the great thing about art is like everyone's so thirsty. Everyone has their like CVs online, so just go and look at people's CVs. Be like, you can look through and you'll be like, oh, that's what they did when they were like just out of undergrad. I can do that. I wonder if that's space. I've definitely done that. I've been like, oh, what did Anne Hirsch do? Okay, let me apply to that. And you can like sort of position yourself in that, but also just already start modeling the thing that you want for the future. So I'd say, especially with this assignment structure, I with my students, I saw students make work for the assignment. And I think it's always important to make work that you actually like. Right. Like, make work that you'll be proud to show to other people as an example. No one wants to see student work. They want to see your work. Right. And so if you can make your student work your work, right, then, you kill two birds with one stone. You don't want a pile of shit that you like never going to show anyone at the end of the thing. Right. And your professors will also be happy because, I don't know, like until I think I had some colleagues who were more into like doing exercises with the students where they're like, do 50,000 different types of mark. And I was like, I don't want to look at that. I'm not gonna grade that. I'd like, give it your best shot. I would make me an art and I want to see good art. Right. But yeah, start off doing what you want to end up doing. So like, if you want to work in a magazine, find a magazine that you can work at now and take photos for. Like maybe there's a student magazine or like a cool local zine that like wants, what are they called? Press, something, flat pack press. Okay. They're like, I think they run with someone who was an undergrad while I was at UT. They seem pretty accessible. And I think they just do like these small zines that they produce. I mean, I don't know, talk to them. The person running it's called Connor Frew. Okay. I think they have a flat pack press Insta and they have like open calls for things. So yeah, just start off doing what you want to end up doing. Don't overwork yourself. You will overwork yourself and then you will be sad because you'll be really tired and you will have hurt your body. So just start off not doing that and like have weekends, and eat properly. I know that sounds stupid.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah, no, don't bring toxic things into your home. Wear gloves when you're painting. Everyone thinks that they shouldn't, but it's actually, there's like carcinogens and like the cadmium that you're using. Yeah. Like, I just mean like stay a human during it because it's going to be really easy to not stay a human. And just be like really kind to yourself. And also don't be angry at yourself if you don't make any money because it's really hard. Yeah. And don't judge the people around you too much, I think, because I think everyone's trying to make it work. And like, it's easy to be like, that person sold out or whatever, but it's like, everyone's just going a different path. Yeah. And I do feel bad for saying that now. No, I didn't mean to like. No. Because I do that. I do that privately a lot. I really do. Like, I'm just like,
why is she doing this now? She's so, I guess, again, we last week with my friend Dante, we talked about the word talented, but you know, it's just kind of like she's got this talent in this certain medium, and now she's doing this or he's doing this, and it's just kind of like, you know, I've seen that with some friends of mine, but then I see them really working on it, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Why did I say that? They're doing really well. Not even like if they're selling anything. I think they're just like working on their new crafts that they like to do, and it's just kind of like they're actually doing really well. I love the influence that they're taking, like from different artists that they talk about whenever they post, um, I never said this about my friend. Like I think she's been going into a lot of ceramic work and sort of sculptural work, but I was a little surprised when she started doing like earrings and stuff. But at the same time, she took a lot of influence from like I apologize if I never say her name right, Yayoi Kusama, and
Mm-hmm.
it's an art. She's an artist that we both really got into after a while, and then of course we saw she was working at a museum, and she got to see her installation way more times than I did. I hated that they only let me see it for a minute because I was like, I want to stay in here, but
Oh my God, it's so delightful. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it was just like it was a great experience for a minute, but of course I wish I could be in there longer, and of course because she worked there, she got to see it more and experience it more, and she's been really influenced by it. And at first I was like, I'm a little surprised she's making jewelry. But then at the same time, I'm like, I just love that she's taking that influence and trying to do something with it. And she's just trying to figure out what to do and where to go. And I think that's the great thing about being an artist is there's no right or wrong necessarily. I think just sometimes I immediately judge right away, and I'm like, why are you drawing Mickey Mouse? You know, it's just kind of like, you know, so
No, I definitely feel that way too. And I think I judge myself very harshly. And I think it makes me really anxious and sad sometimes, right?
yeah.
Like, I think the other thing to remember is that, like, everybody is probably like, I definitely have those, like, sit on my bed for 2 hours and, like, stare at the wall moments where I'm like,
Yeah.
what have I done to myself? What have I done with my life? And then this is often like after like seeing the, you know, the Instagram post by like a successful friend person, and you're like, I'm like, I'm happy for you, but
Right.
also, should I have done this? Uh, but like I think if you're like going out with like a kind attitude, then you can also, like, if you're being kind to people, you can probably be kinder to yourself as well. And like just be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You're gonna and like, I don't know, haters gonna hate. Like, it's gonna be like, school is assess where the criticism is coming from, right? Like, don't not grow based on the critique you get, because that's some of the most important stuff you're gonna get. But at the same time, like, I definitely have like a couple of like gross people in my head who like whisper like nasty things to me, where I'm like, how did you get in there, you figure of authority? Like, I wouldn't ever do you have that where like someone said something to you about your work that's kind of mean, or like you look back on, you're like, why did I take it that seriously at the time?
Honestly, no.
That's
At least
good.
not for me. Yeah, I love critiques, and I don't think I've ever had a bad experience where I took it personally, because I'm like, you know, we've all said it, or we all, like, all my professors have always reiterated, especially because we always have different levels of people in there, and sometimes depending on the class, sometimes they're not even an art major and they're just trying the class, and they just try to reiterate, like, we're all here to talk about work. We're not here to talk about you. Yes, you worked on it, but we're all here to improve. And I think that's one thing I really love about school is you have that immediate network of peers to talk to, and whether it's during the critique or after or even before, you know, it's like, how can I improve, and what do you think of this, or is my message coming across right? I think that's one big reason I love school. But of course, you know, I know some people don't even care to get those critiques either, you know, whether they're positive or constructive or not. They're just like, nah, I'm okay. So
school critiques are kind of great because everyone's hopefully usually operating in really good faith and actually trying to help, and it's such a actually kind of a gift that people are giving you their attention and their responses in that way. I think one thing that I was not like super prepared for coming out into a more art world context is that a lot of curators, they've never been artists. And so like your teachers have all been artists, your peers are all artists, and they're
Right.
all coming from this really gentle little place, right? Where you're like, oh, I know that your heart is out here, you know, and I'm like poking at it. And so like, you know, within that there's an understanding, but you're gonna encounter people who are holding power in the outworld who don't have that intuition.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of an interesting sort of moment where you're like, oh, someone's being maybe harsh in a way where they don't quite understand
Right.
how their I don't know, how their words are affecting you. And what it's like to be an artist.
Right. I do wonder, you know, with curators and people who I guess help create those shows and fund those shows, has anybody ever asked you to change anything or, you know, suggested things for your show that they want to see?
That
like,
I didn't want.
Yeah, that you didn't want.
Yeah. But it's not usually, I think the thing is that like people will suggest stuff, right? But like I don't think they're actually, I've actually in the past been like, oh no, they want this thing, but I don't want this thing. But like often they won't even remember that they said that the next time you talk.
Okay.
And like ultimately just like be like, great idea, and then just do what you want. It's fine.
Okay.
or you know, or often they have really good suggestions because they'll have intuitions around visitor flow and stuff that you hadn't even like thought about in the space and about visitor interaction, and they actually have like their space of expertise that's really, really valuable and great. You know, that can be awesome too.
Okay. Yeah, because I do come from a dance background. I danced for like 13, 14 years. All the way till college. And I remember, and I know it's television, and I know it's dramatized for entertainment, but I remember seeing like a show of mine where they didn't have the funds to put on a show, and her sister, I believe, she's real rich, she's like a lawyer, she's like, oh, I totally love the arts, even though she knows nothing about the arts at all. She's like, I'll fund it for you. And then she's sitting there in their rehearsal. She's like, I want to see what I'm paying for. And she's like, okay. And they're doing the rehearsal and she's writing notes and she's just looking at her like, what is she doing? And then she's like, okay, guys, great rehearsal. We'll come back tomorrow. She's like, nope, I have a few notes. And she's trying to critique in a way. And she's like, you know, this, and she's trying to do a dance move. She goes, we need less of that. And it's just like, is she kidding right now? You know, it's like, and I asked my teacher at the time, I was like, does this happen? She goes, it happens, but probably not to that extreme necessarily. They don't like say, we need less of this move. They just say, I don't know if this fits in with what we were going for, or it's completely opposite of what I thought we were doing as a show. Can we take it out or can we change it? And it can be frustrating, but at the same time, you know, they are paying for it. And it's just kind of like, it's like, what do we do at that point? Do we just say, we'll go with something else, or we stay here and we change it because we still want to do a show and we put so much work into it? So.
Yeah. No, it's, I mean, there's so much freedom in a way to like having no money and doing your own stuff, right? Because that's, no one's the boss of you. You can just do your thing. But I guess, the more people are involved and the more money is involved and the more stakeholders are involved, then you have these different things that you're trying to navigate. It's just, sometimes you just sort of have to show people what is good. I don't know. It's a difficult problem. I think mostly everybody's operating in good faith though. You know, no one's being like cynical or anything, and everyone's trying really hard. Right. And you know what happened to me actually at Women in Their Work? Like Rachel and I had some, like, she was so supportive, right? Rachel Stuckey, and helpful. But I remember her rewriting my statement for, is that the one that goes in the back of the postcard that gets sent out? Yeah. And I was like, you can't change it. It's mine, mine. And actually, I was kind of being super prissy and like a diva about it. And I think it was really educational. She was very patient with me. And I really appreciated her like talking me through her thoughts and me being able to point out the things that were like, you know, I was like, that actually feels like it's misrepresenting me or something important about me. And so sometimes those, I think, can also be valuable challenges where you're actually learning something about yourself. And you're taking a moment to be like, okay, ego, You go sit in the corner for a minute.
Calm down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think if you can have that kind of dialogue, that's really great.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. So just before we sign off or anything, I do want just for people listening, watching, whatever, I just want you to talk about your work, what you've done, and then what's coming up. What have you got in the works right now?
Okay. See, this is coming back to the thing we were talking about earlier, right? So I work with sort of performance and sculpture and video work and lots of things in between that kind of make things move with pictures. I think a lot of my work is quite sort of grand and at the same time quite pathetic. So I'll make big floppy things, like a big version of my face that says "wow," or a big floppy car that I'm like animating from the inside. I don't make work very quickly. I work quite slowly. Or at least that's what it feels like from the inside. I think it always feels like from the inside to everybody, and then like people on the outside are like, "Oh, you make a lot of work." A lot of my work is about gender and like anxiety around immigration, because that's kind of just been my life, especially since I moved to the US. Right. It's been just, I moved here in the Trump era. I moved to Texas. I grew up with a very different image and self-image of gender than, and when you move to a new country, you obviously have like, you're thrown up against that in like a really visual, like clear way, because, the things that you're like, you grew up in, it's like this sort of warm soup where you can't feel your body. And then suddenly you're like out in the cold, like shivering. You're like, oh shit. And so you're like, oh, that's super weird. And so it's like trying to deal with that. Trying to think, I recently have been working on a collaboration with my collaborator, Kevin Brophy, called Housewives of the Queer Hearth, which is a show that was up for 1 day. Yeah. Or 2 days, and then it was COVID.
Oh no.
But it's okay. So like, we're gonna return greater and more terrible than ever before afterwards, hopefully. Great. If we get like space to show it. And so we're working on that, which is like a feminist, futurist boudoir with lots of technology in it, and so it's sort of like land of tomorrow. Oh, cool. But yeah, it's very, very silly. It's like Greta's showing you around the room being like, welcome to the land of tomorrow. And there's lots of prints in it, like fabric prints. I was doing a lot of research into material feminism, which is about sort of like how architecture and urban planning can actually like physically orient your body in particular ways. And there was this like stream of utopian feminists who did these like really weird urban plans where they're like erasing kitchens from houses, and you have like communal kitchens. Oh, cool. It's the research around that has been really, really fun, and I'm really excited to keep going with that show. And then, but that's sort of on pause right now until we like have further knowledge, because that's a very physical show, right? Yeah. And then I'm working on the podcast that I talked about earlier called The Black Stick and the White Stick with my residency in Germany. I've made 2 episodes so far. I'm trying to work on the 3rd episode, but it's giving me a lot of anxiety because it's about the Holocaust and it's really depressing, which is like not a surprise, but at the same time it's so sad. And so I'm hopefully the 3rd episode of that will be coming out soon. I haven't properly done, like, this has all been soft launching, sending it to friends and sending it to the residency. And then once I have like 3 episodes or 4, I'm going to do a real launch of that. And then I've been working on Space Witches, which is this project for, with a helmet.
Oh, that's so fun.
Yay. Yeah, I've been working on costumes and stuff. I've recently shot a trailer for it. It's going to be a video and maybe also like a, far away from the mic, like a digital installation. And yeah, that's hopefully going to happen in the fall. And that's been really fun because I feel like I've been able to make these objects in my studio using just like foam and sewing and puffy paint stuff. I make with PVA and like flour.
Oh wow.
And that's about sort of history of land rights and land use, and trying to think about what the future would be like if we hadn't had like witch burnings in Europe. And sort of trying to think about like anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist space flight.
Wow. Yeah. Got a lot going on.
So that's always why it's hard to describe one's practice, right? Because like I think when you see the work, you're like, oh, Rosa made that, you know.
Yeah.
But then when you talk about it all, it seems very disparate, but it makes sense and it comes together.
Right. And I think,
promise.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, something my boyfriend asked me is like, so why do you do this podcast? Like, he's like, I'm not trying to discourage you from doing it, but like, I'm curious why you started. I'm like, one, I was a little bored. And two, you know, something my friend said last week in our podcast is like, he's like, you know, since I've known you, you've been this very verbal person about, you know, things you want to talk about. And it's interesting to see who watches or listens to what I put out there. I did do like one podcast on like relationships and only one person listened to it. And I'm like, no one wants to hear me talk about relationships, I guess, you know, that's fine, you know, and maybe that's a little less of my forte. And I'm like, you know, I'm trying to find my footing with this because I don't know where I want to go with this. But the more and more I do it, the more, you know, my friends are like, this could technically be part of your art. This could be something that you make that you can put later into your work as well, or you can add it on to the work that you make. And I'm like, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I would do that though. And yeah.
Well, talking about money and sponsors, if you do well with your podcast, you can always have people sponsor your podcast.
Yeah, I looked into that too, and I'm like, I'm like, right now I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes first, and then, you know, because I have like 36 followers on Instagram, which is like, okay, cool, whatever. But you know, I've been doing like small advertisements that you can do on Instagram too, and I get a few views, which is cool. So at least trying to get, you know, some people to see it and listen to it, and it's just kind of like I try just to not focus on the numbers also, and it's a little difficult too. We talked about that last week with our podcast. It's hard not to get stuck in how many people are watching, how many people are liking it. You know, it's difficult. It's just like yeah,
but like little treats, like little
yeah,
shots of happiness. You're like, oh yes, approval.
Yeah, right. And at the same time, it's like, well, how does that work with people who want to sponsor you and people who want to invest in what you're doing? You know, do they look at the numbers? Do they look at, we want to help you get more numbers and more people to listen, kind of thing? So
that depends on who you're getting to sponsor you, right? Like if commercial interests, you know, Casper Mattress or something, are going to want you to have lots of followers. But if you're like applying for, I don't know, City of Austin, like development grant or something, then they might be like, oh, you're a small podcast, let's help.
Okay, that's great.
So it depends if it's a philanthropic sort of effort or not.
Yeah, because I've gotten like such random emails. Like I said before that I want to do transcripts for each podcast, but then I do it by myself and it's way too hard. And now I'm like, I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. I have way too much stuff going on in my life that I just can't sit there and pause and listen and write all at the same time. It's so much work. And then I've gotten emails where like, we can do it for you for this price. I'm like, I don't have money. All my money goes to school and to my apartment. It's just not something I can do. And yeah.
You could, I was just on this, they were doing like a seminar the other day not on Zoom. They did it on YouTube Live, and YouTube auto transcribes your stuff for you.
Oh,
so just like, I think there might be technological solutions. Obviously it's not perfect, right? And it gets some things wrong, but like it'll make it much more accessible if you have something like that. So maybe even just putting your videos on YouTube and allowing closed captions for that might be a solution.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I understand. I feel very invested with that as well, with the podcast that I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I really, really should do that, because I mean, even like my gran, I've interviewed her for it and she kind of can't hear very well. And I'm like, pretty shitty to make something, interview her for it, and then be like, no, Gran, you can't experience this because, you know, screw you. And then I was like, oh shit, I should translate this to German as well because I'm doing it for this German institution, and not a lot of people speak English, but not everybody. And then like, oh no, I have months of work. What have we set out to do?
Right. Yeah.
I'm really glad that you're doing it though. It's really great.
Thank you. No, and
thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, thank you for talking to me. And I can't wait for you to put your podcast out. I want to hear that. I do want to hear it.
It's such a beautiful. Do you listen to 99% Invisible?
I've heard about it, but I haven't looked into it yet.
It's just like it's a podcast about design in the regular world, and it's very soothing person. Roman Mars like voices it, but he was so sweet because like I think I listen to a lot of podcasts, and like there's a lot of people making fun of how many people make podcasts now, and they're like, you know, everyone has a podcast, and he was so sweet. He was like, I love podcasts. I'm glad that so many people have podcasts now, and he's like a really successful podcast host, and I was like, oh, that's really nice. Thank you for welcoming us into your world instead of being a dick.
Yeah. Okay, that's great.
I was like, I'm going to take that energy forward.
Yeah, same now. I love that. Yeah, that was one thing I was like, why am I doing this? Everyone has a podcast and I'm just going to get lost in the shuffle. But,
you know, even if like 4 people listen to your podcast, they're still having a good time.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, so what are we going to do in COVID, you know?
Right.
Like,
we're all bored in COVID.
Yeah, you know, and like in a year we'll be able to get out and lick each other's eyeballs, but like until then,
okay, yeah,
clean the house and listen to podcasts.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you, Rosa. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I do too. Okay. Bye. Nice to meet you. Bye.
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in to my podcast today. I really appreciate it. If you're listening, this will come out on YouTube within 1 or 2 days. Thank you so much, Rosa, for joining me today. I really appreciate it. If you want to look at her work, I will link it in the description. Her name is Rosa Nussbaum, and she's an amazing, fantastic artist. I mean, she might be blushing as I say that, but I really appreciate her being here today. And thank you guys for listening. I will come out with a new episode on Friday. I do want to talk a few things on mental health, just because I think we're all kind of going a little crazy with COVID. And then, of course, with my fellow college students being out there or not being out there for college right now, just, well, you know, it's driving us all crazy. Just this very wavering moment of what's going to happen with school, and is it going to make it worse in terms of COVID? So thank you all for joining me today, and I will see you on Friday. Thank you. Bye-bye.